This is my mini-disc player I bought back in, I think, 2000 or 2001, a few months before I actually started working for Curry's. I bought it at Curry's and it was about £250. Well, I'm sure it was £250 actually. And I was just so impressed with the format at the time and the fact that you could make really good quality recordings on such a small disc. And I've still got it somewhere, a JVC player, mini-disc player, which I used to use when I was walking to work and listen to music that I'd recorded off this. I used to have this as part of my stack system with a CD player. And you could connect the CD player through the optical line in, and you could make perfect digital copies, although you were using the compression, which is what mini-disc use. So over the years when I worked at Curry's, I saw the different mini-disc players and decks come in. There were mini-disc players for the car, portable mini-disc players and recorders. They seemed to be very popular. And then you had your hi-fi separates, which didn't seem to be quite as popular. Now, I never seemed to sell as many of these as I did the portable player and recorders. And my friend who I worked with at the time when mini-disc came out, she bought a Sony mini-disc player for her car. And I think over the years that I had this mini-disc deck, I must have made about 100 mini-discs on it. At the time, I used to record anything that I would download off the internet from the computer. I would record through the line output of the computer onto the line input of the mini-disc. So I would make all the MP3s off the computer onto mini-disc, which seems a bit of a silly thing to do, but it's because back then the computer we were using was running Windows 98 second edition, and it seemed to be constantly needing to have the operating system reinstalled for various reasons, whether it was upgraded or somebody had deleted some files or it had a virus or something. So what I basically did is back the MP3s up onto mini-disc, and ironically I don't have the MP3s anymore, but I have the backup onto mini-disc. One of the things that I never ever saw when I worked at Curry's was boomboxes, a bit like this Sharp radio cassette player I have here from the 90s. I never saw these with mini-disc decks in. One never came into the store that I worked at anyway. A few years, sort of, I would say from about 2004 or 5, I did see the odd one in on eBay or online, and it had a mini-disc deck, but you had to plug it into the mains, which I thought was rather stupid, because the idea of a portable system was you could take it out somewhere and you could hear the mini-disc out loud. It seems as though you either heard mini-discs at home via a stack system or a MIDI system, because there were lots of MIDI systems I remember selling at the time that had mini-discs in, small hi-fis. Or you had the personal stereo mini-disc players, those personal ones that you put with the headphones in your ear. But there never seemed to be radio cassette players with the mini-disc deck in as an option. And if they did, they weren't portable, they weren't battery powered. This thing, I think, takes something like 8 D-cell batteries and just eats batteries like crazy. This is actually one of the last best Sharp radio cassette players that personally I think that was ever made. This had everything you could ever dream of from a radio cassette player in the sort of early 90s. It has twin logic cassette decks with your dubbing, high-speed dubbing as it was called at the time. It has a CD player. It has a motorized volume control knob. Everything is controllable from the remote. Absolutely everything. I think even the edit suite is on the. Basically, you put the CD in, you punch in the length of the cassette, and it'll work out how many tracks will fit onto what side before it auto-reverses and records the other side. It's completely auto-reversing, and you can choose the various different auto-reverse modes. Timer, sleep timer, and it has the active servo technology, or the AST system, which is monitoring the speakers for distortion, so you can get really good bass at low volume, and if you turn the volume up to max you won't blow the speakers, it won't distort the sound. It has proper bass ported speakers. It's a really good system. If you can ever find one of these, they're worth going for. They literally were the last sort of good radio cassette player that I think Sharp ever made. There's a few Panasonic models that have similar features, which were an awful lot of money at the time, but this was one of the high-end ones, and it will all run on batteries, but it will go through them very quickly. Well, the other couple of months ago, I actually found a CD radio cassette player with a mini-disc deck. A rather nasty one, I must admit. It's a rather nasty, cheap thing. Although I suspect at the time it probably wasn't very cheap. But indeed, it is a mini-disc player with a CD and cassette, radio obviously, and importantly, it will run on batteries. It's by Ventura, which I think were a cheap brand anyway. I'm not entirely convinced that they actually made the whole thing. This runs on 8 D cells as well. I've got it on D cells at the minute. I'll plug it into the AC because the display will not illuminate, which is a clever feature really, because it would drain the battery. I'll demonstrate the various features of it. Turn it on. So I've got this Sony cleaning disc just to demonstrate that. We're on tape at the minute, so let's try the tape. Unfortunately, the tape is a rather cheap and nasty one. It's because tape, basically they were abandoning the tape format by this stage. The Sharp one I just showed you then was from the early 90s. This is probably from 2003, 2004, something like that. The idea being that you'd probably record your CDs and your tapes onto mini-disc, although you can record the CD and the mini-disc onto cassette. The annoying, rather disappointing thing about this cassette deck is it's auto-stop, which is something, but it has a permanent magnet erase head, which is just, well, it's just not very good. It just shows you the sign of a poor quality cassette deck. Anything with a permanent magnet erasing the tape is just not very accurate. It does sound not too bad. That's typical, isn't it? Well, let's just go on to that's the radio, and it has one of these thumb wheels that you tune the radio in with. I'll put it onto FM, but I don't think we'll get much of a signal. There's so much interference in the building. All these power supplies. I think that's smooth radio trying to come in there. Yes, it's not got a very good signal, but that's the radio anyway, so this is the tape. The sound is very boxy, I suppose. There's not much bass at all. These things aren't bass ports, they're just for show. I think it's about 3 watts per channel. But the tape has not really any detectable wow or flutter to my ears. Despite it being a very cheap cassette deck. I'll demonstrate the mini disc. It'll ask me to press track 2 because it's the cleaning. Press track 2, there we go. The mini disc sounds quite good. As good as the speakers on this will allow. And of course you've got your track title and everything like you'd have normally on a mini disc. Let's try the CD player. That's the next one up. And then play. The jog does all of the functions of the mini disc and the CD player. CD player sounds okay, it sounds good. It's not an expensive CD player, but this is quite a small system if you think that's my hand. For what it is, it's okay. I mean, one of the reasons I was looking for one of these back in the day was because it's just handy to be able to listen to your mini discs without having to run it through the whole hi-fi. If you're going somewhere and you want to hear it out loud without putting headphones in, you can just carry this around and you can still listen to your mini discs. Of course, there were better mini discs with mini disc players with CD and cassettes. I've not actually seen one with a cassette deck, and the other versions I've seen with CD players and mini disc, they seem to have dropped the support for battery power. So I picked this one up just because I'd never seen anything with the battery power before, and it's quite handy if I just want to listen to mini discs without having to go to the hassle of setting the hi-fi up or finding my portable one out and charging the batteries up for the portable one. This is just nice to be able to just plug it in, put the disc in, and you can hear it. I haven't recorded anything with this yet. I mean, I've got no need to really. It's more just playing back the discs I already have. I can't be bothered to digitize them on the computer, especially when I've got working mini disc decks now. It just seems little point transferring them. I don't think I've got anything on them which is too precious that if I was never to be able to play mini discs again, it would be the end of the world. But it's still nice to be able to just have a player I can take about and play the mini discs back on. So if you ever come across a mini disc player that has a cassette deck and a CD player built in, then you've probably found something quite rare, not exactly something that turns up every day. I certainly never sold any when I worked at Curry's, and I worked at Curry's from 2001 to 2006 or 2007. So I never came across them in all the time that I worked there. So yes, I just thought I'd pick this one up because it's something I'd never seen before.